though I may talk initially with the general communication skills, later we are going to focus more on communication skills for teachers and how effectively they can communicate. That's the one part. Then what are the barriers in communication? How our communications has what you call impacted by other factors, and lastly, how to improve our communication. So let me start. First thing is this: the communication skills or communication as such is not something new. Everybody as of will communicate, do communicate day in and out. But the present scenario, the lot of conditions have been changed. So under such scenario, how to improve our communication skills? So that's a major theme of the talk. So when we talk about communication skills, it is basically like how we can use what you call the language and express our information in an efficient and effective manner so that our students can understand better. Because many times students say this teacher doesn't know about what you call how to speak, or this doesn't know how to convey. That means what? We lack some kind of communication which we have failed to reach our students. So in such cases, definitely we have to improve. So how best we can improve in our ability of usage of a language, and though sometimes we are good in language, we may not be able to express in a simple way. So that's the issue. Then a communication is so important in our lives, not only in the profession, even in our personal lives. Because remember, a good orator with having lot of what you call humor and presence of mind can make the class more effective. So we'll discuss more one by one. So what are the basic goals of communications? If we look into the first goal itself is to change behavior, because because of the communication we tend to change the behavior of the other person. In specific here, we want to change the behavior of our students so that they can be more serious into the class and they can listen to you more, so that the ultimate thing is, because of this behavioral change, we can expect a good citizenship behavior in the student as well as good academic achievement. So these are the things. And to get action, because of our communication, some action will be done. Now, communication, without communication, sometimes actions are may not be done. So action is another important aspect, acts as one of the goals of communication. Then to ensure understanding. So many times what happens uh, when you talk about what you call, subject factors or any specific subject, we fail to understand whether our students have understood what you are telling. But the goal of communication is to ensure what you call that our pupil or students have understood what we are trying to convey for them. Then the next part is persuading, where we have to repeatedly we have to what you call tell them, we have to persuade them so that whatever we have communicated to them should be fixed into their minds. And the last one, as you see, to get and give information. So that is where uh, in communication we have inputs where we get from a lot of inputs from others, and there is output process where we try to provide information. So all these acts as the basic communication goals. Then quickly looking into the what you call communication process. Remember, when the communication process, basically what we do is we send and receive the information between a group of people or individual to individual or group to group. Okay, different types. But basically, as a teacher, you will be now what you call you are what you call sending what you call a message in terms of a class to a group of what you call individuals called as receivers. Especially they are called as students here. So a sender as a teacher will use channels to transmit the message which a receiver or a student receives it. In fact, the students gives feedback, then you will become receiver. Where whenever the student gives what you call a feedback, then he will become a sender and you will become a receiver. And this is what you call a feedback process. And sometimes what happens, the communication process has some issues because of the noise problems, because of the noise issues, that also can be blocked, so that also can happen. But basically a communication process is that there should be a communicator or a sender, or there could be a receiver or a person who receives it, and in between there should be a message, and there should be a media. Without media, we cannot proceed with the communication. So that's the idea behind the communication process. So to have what you call effective communication, now these are the 7 P's or 7 C's of effective communication. One thing is completeness. Now, why our students don't understand? Because sometimes what we are taught or what we are communicated may be incomplete. So the moment the content is incomplete, the students are finding it difficult to understand and comprehend. So a completeness of matter, what we convey to our pupil, is also matters for effective communication. Then conciseness, how briefly and what the brevity we are going to use, that is also more important. I know nowadays because of the syllabus is too vast and sometimes we find it difficult to finish it. So that time what's going to happen is we might have to reduce the content, but this content has to be have brevity, but it should be what you call, if you elaborate it more and more, the student might get bored. So your conciseness is very important. Then consideration, this is also very important, for whom we are talking about. So once we are talking about whom, for whom we are talking about, basically they are the students. So we have to get into their level, because we cannot use our level of what you call language acquisition, because many times especially when we, if we start using jargons and all, where high tech words and complicated words or some kind of words which are never understood or never heard by the students, and in such cases the communication is incomplete, because student may find it difficult to understand. So while talking to a student, it's better to get into their level, how much, what is their level of understanding. Based on that, we can go for that consideration. Then the clarity. So here, as a teacher, we should not beat around the bush. So there should be complete clarity in what we speak or what we disseminate a knowledge. So to have clarity, please understand, we should understand the subject better. So the moment we have the what you call mastery over the subject, automatically the clarity comes. So that requires lot of preparation in the background, especially for the young teachers. Uh, Young teachers definitely what you call a lot of preparation goes before they getting into the class for the delivery of a talk or lecture. So the more you are prepared, there will be a highest clarity in your talk. So the more clarity you have, it is easy for understanding for a student, then your communication is highly effective. Then concreteness, what we speak about it is should not be what you call kind of haphazard thing. So you should speak to the point, and you should have what you call the content part should be highlighted exactly to the point. That is more important. We cannot what you call talk something which is unrelevant, irrelevant, and such times the student might get diverted. So again, your communication is not going to be affected. So have concreteness in your talk. Then courtesy also important, because sometimes how we communicate in your day-to-day life, the courtesy is also important. We cannot use all the tones, same tone for everyone. The tones would vary, what you call, depending upon the individual you are addressing. So the courtesy is also important. Then the correctness of information. So nowadays, what is going to happen is, because of the what you call technological innovation, the information sometimes highly misleading. So that's why we don't just use the word WhatsApp. We use the word WhatsApp University. Why we use this word? Because the whatever the content is there on the WhatsApp, we cannot assure that all of them are 100% exactly right. So that's where the correctness of what you call material is being questioned. So that is why the more you give the information in a clarified and in a clear way, and you give the facts and figures, I think then your communication is very effective. Just practice all these 7 C's of effective communication. Definitely you can be what you call named as one of the good communicator. So then we are getting into what you call what is basically a communication. So when we talk about communication, series of experience, varieties of experiences we do have, like it could be communication through here, what you call, we do hear, we do smell, we do see, we do taste, and we do touch. So there are what you call, from various sources we get the experiences, and these experiences make us okay into a process of communication. So slowly getting into the communication part. especially when you talk about types of communication. So there are varieties of classifications have been given, but I am focusing on one type of communication classification. So basically, I speak about 5 types of classification of communication. So the first part itself is the verbal communication, where right now I am verbally communicating to you, where I am using a language and I am trying to communicate to you, where a language is being used, and it will be what you call disseminated, or it will be what you call transmitted through one of the media. Now we are in a Google form, or what you call a Zoom. Sorry, it's a Zoom platform. So through uh, Zoom platform we are communicating, but though we are communicating through Zoom platform, it's a verbal communication where I'm using a language and you are listening to me. Then there is a non-verbal communication where we don't use the words, but we use gestures and postures. So while using gestures and postures, this is a very important aspects of communication, where I'm going to show you later a graph where a vast majority of communication is constituted by a non-verbal communication rather than any other types of communications. So where we use extensive gestures and postures, we'll talk more about this later. Then there's a written communication where we use what you call, for example, your SMS, your emails, your letters to the principal or others concerned. You are getting letters from others. All that where we talk about communication which is written form in any one of the language. So then it's called as a written communication. Then there's a touch communication where this is not a good idea, touch communication in the institution, because it might bring a negative consequence for you. But same, the touch communication can bring what you call wonders at home. The idea is, when you talk about the touch, it's basically a physical touch, and nowadays you have to be very careful when you have a what you call physical touch, where you try to pat a student or something like that. You should be very careful that the student should not feel offended. Though you are trying to appreciate the student might feel offended that you are trying to what you call offend the students, or invasion of privacy. So in such case, what happens is you may be accused. So be careful about the touch communication in your what you call work setup. But the same touch communication can make wonders or magic in your home. Then there is another concept called as chemical communication, which we find especially in animal world. So in the animal world also there are what you call series of communications are happening, and one of the type of communication is chemical communication. The best example would I give is where the ants trail. So you can see there is a line. There's a lengthy what you call lane of ants moving in the same direction without even losing the track. And this happens not with the viewing. This happens with the hormone called as a chemical called as pheromone. So because of this pheromone, they keep what you call a track of the line. And if you split the line by your finger, again the track will be reformed along their finger side. So that means what? They now communicate not by their eyes, but they communicate through their what you call pheromones. So this can be there with the animals, and even in the cat family, it's very famous. Whether it's your pet cat or cats in the wild, like tigers, they all communicate through chemical communication. Your own pet dog has a chemical communication. That's why this being used in what you call investigations too. That's why if you see famous dog squads in India and military, where because of the chemical communication ability they have, sometimes they have better ability than us, but still they can communicate. And of late recently, there are some research indicating that we do have chemical communication, because uh, that is why long back there was a astronomer called as Paracelsus who predicted that the planets have got influence on our behavior. the planets. So that is why sometimes we behave in a different way, and this can be what do you call for the reason that why we behave differently. So that's where the chemical communication also is there. So all these types of communications are there frequently we can find, but today we are going to restrict our discussion more on verbal and non-verbal communication, preferably more of non-verbal communication. So I said communication and non-verbal communication constitutes more than 85% of the what you call communication. So the words and tone which we give will constitute around just 15%. So that means most of the time we are into the world of what you call non-verbal communications. Our body gestures and postures will convey more than our words. So that is why communication where that is why we use a lot of what you call body language inside the class. So we'll see what how it will be done. So when you talk about what you call body language as it constitutes 85% of our total communication. So if you start with the first, where simply laughing can convey a lot of things. For example, uh, when you say laughing gives a, what you call simple idea. That means you like the other person. Otherwise, you don't laugh. Don't take it in a what you call a negative sense. Anybody can like anyone. So the moment you feel like having some attachment with the person, so it definitely it brings a laugh. And if you don't like a person, you avoid the person or you may not laugh. Then ways of talking, like you can make out whether your student is having a stress or this one, what kind of condition he is or she is. Because when you're talking about what you call while talking, a lot of things are conveyed apart from the wordings, the pauses, the gestures, the facial expressions, all that. And the posture also, how a student stands in front of you, you can make out whether the student is a very innocent student or whether he is acting or playing with you or he is a culprit. Just by posture also you can make out. Then the appearance also very important, whether tidiness and this one, being what you call a student or yourself, how we should appear also matters a lot. But this can be conveyed through a non-verbal communication. Then head movements also very important, because uh, we call nodding. Nodding gives the silent meaning of that they are accepting it what you are saying. A simple nod of head will give the expression that what you call nodding the head gives that there is agreement with what you are telling. Then hand movements. Many times we are far off, friends are far off. We are not able to speak from our mouth because then we just hand wave. That gives lot of connection that okay we are still together. So hand waving itself is another what you call type of non-verbal communication. Then eye movements. Say what you call eye movements also gives lot of what you call this one. Usually with the students, if they are not talking to you, giving with the eye to eye contact, or they are trying to avoid your eye contact, that means there is something wrong in the student because they are trying to avoid you. So because serious and what do you call a student who is very serious in studies, a student who is innocent, a student who wants to get more information from you, he'll not avoid your what do you call eye. He'll be directly talking to you, having a break eye contact. But students who try to avoid you, definitely they what do you call they block their eye movements towards you. They may be looking somewhere else. So that's another problem. Then the facial expression gives a lot of what you call clues for you, whether the student is interested in the class, whether student is not interested in the class, whether your class is getting bored. That also can be seen through facial expressions. Then body contact, shaking hands, that's also very important. You may not talk but you shake hands, but that means the idea is the familiarity can be seen even without talking. Then closeness, we'll be talking more about this in the closeness later, where how much we have to intrude into other space. And if I go too much into nearby to one's place, I think definitely it irritates the other person, which we'll discuss. So all these are some aspects of non-verbal communication or body language, which we have to take care of very seriously in our classroom interactions, as well as public interactions, as well as interactions at home. Then, specifically talking now, teaching as a process of communication. Now, when you talk about teaching as a process of communication, now, whom we are referring? When teaching involves a teacher is required, a textbook is required, a writer is required, a LCD or TV is required, there should be a presenter or a radio broadcast, any such kind of, because nowadays even universities have their own radios. So in the process of communication, these things are important. And what you call things are trying to convey. So basically, as a teacher, whether it's online or offline mode, we try to what you call explain the content of the lessons, and through referring books and other what you call websites, where we want to explain the content of the lessons or the syllabi which have been given. And how we'll do, that's also more important. Either if it's a offline mode, it is face to face. If it is online mode, it is through virtual media, or it could be using what you call LCDs, like pictures. One can use short films. Those days earlier there used to be slides, and even through radio and TV also we can communicate a lot. That's why in few of the this one countries, including India, where there are continuous classes on specific subjects. For example, IGNO conducts regular classes, and which can be watched through TV. So those who are not able to get time during their work hours can see the content and can watch the TV and get to know about the content of the syllabi which they are trying to learn. And whom this communication for in teaching? It is basically learners. We don't call them as students in education setup. The students who are studying in different classes are referred as learners. And how we measure the effect? What kind of effect? The reaction of the students and feedback of the students. Many times students say, sir, your class is wonderful. Sometimes they might say, this teacher's class is boring. So this gives a lot of feedback, where there is a need for what you call improvement if they give a negative feedback, and if they give positive feedback, it gives a lot of satisfaction, but you can still improve upon that. So teaching as a process of communication has several such contents. Then we come to the idea of communication in education. So as I said, as a teacher, you are teaching a content, what you call, through a method and a instruction mode. So you can use what you call a lecture method, you can use the discussion method, you can use lecture come discussion method, all that. And the communication goes by what? Media and communication or instruction. So it can be a recorded talk, sometimes it will be there, sometimes there will be a direct talk, like you give instructions and media helps us. So sometimes within this, there is no projected media. So where we are going to use software approach. Sometimes there is a projected media where you require hardware approach. So in communication in education involves both software approach and hardware approach, based on the media which are what you call selecting, which ultimately what you call leads to a good communication. So this is what you call a process which is involved in education. Then when you come to the classroom communication, as we started in the beginning, so a sender, if you see the cursor, there is a sender, what you call, he tries to what you call send what you call a message to the receiver. So how it does, see, before he's sending any message, he has to formulate something to say, he has to encode, that is more important, and he has to transmit through wordings and all. So the formulation, like preparation of the content, encoding is how much to tell and how to tell, and transmission is on what mode. So this leads to a message content. So this can go through signs, symbols, and words, which ultimately received by a receiver or the student. So that's why it's called as a learner. So it can be either in offline mode, again, because of the corona pandemic. Now we are what you call practice both what you call offline as well as online teaching. Then once the receiver receives the message which is given by the teacher, so now he transmits back. Now he has to decode, because whatever teacher has said in his word through the encoded words, now the receiver has to decode the words to understand, and while decoding he has to interpret what is being said by the teacher. So in turn, he might give a message whether he's understood or not via again a medium, classroom medium, whether it's a direct face to face or it could be online medium, where you might get sometimes questions from the students that they have not understood, or they want to have more clarification on a content which they want to learn more. So in such cases, what they are going to do is they try to decode, and when they don't understand, they want to transmit and they interpret the content. When they are not clear about it, they'll send a message and they might seek what you call further clarification. So this in till he understands. So this involves a complete classroom communication. So that is more important. Then I said about what you call body language. Now we'll get into what you call understanding the language of the students and others around in and around you. So when you talk about territories and zones, please understand there are 4 types of zones anthropologists have identified. One is the intimate zone, second one is the personal zone, third one is the social zone, and fourth one is the public zone. A intimate zone, it's a very nearest one, may range from touching to 1.5 feet. But remember, this kind of zone is permitted only for your spouse and children, not for others, except very, very close friends where they can come very near. So this is called as intimate zone. Definitely, this cannot be used in the institutional setup, your classroom environment, because nobody will, what you call keep the distance just 1.5 feet, especially a teacher and a student. Uh, but this will be used more at home. But remember, you have to be very careful while interacting with the students how much distance you maintain. Then comes a personal zone. So in personal zone, it may range from 1.5 2 feet to 4.5 foot. Now remember, this is where your close friends, you are going to somebody's house, you are maybe attending what you call some what you call minimum numbered party where not big numbers are there. So where the personal zone is maintained, within that close will be 1.5 to 2 feet, and the far off distance could be 2.5 to 4.5 feet. Now slowly we come to social zone, where if there is a what you call big function, or if there is a marriage, now what's going to happen is you try to maintain more distance. At a close level it could be 4 to 7 feet, and at the far off there could be 7 to 12 feet. The last one is public zone, where the distance is quite far. Close is as much as 12 to 25 feet, far is more than 25 feet, sometimes it could be 100 foot. Now the idea here is, in public zone it is like you are listening to a political leader or a religious leader who are trying to say their views. But remember, you have to understand, from intimate to personal to social to public zone, you see there's the increase of distance. I'm talking about a physical distance. So there is an increase of physical distance, and once if you see a small analysis within this will give you the clear idea that as the distance increases, intimacy decreases. That means what? The more the distance you maintain, you are not very close to each other. The lesser the distance you maintain, that indicates that you are close together. Now, as a teacher, you should know what kind of distance you should maintain with your students, as well as you should maintain with the colleagues, as well as you have to maintain with your principal or higher officials. Because remember, in your institutional setup, it is not that you are the person only working. There are several others are working, including students. They watch you, how much distance you keep, and many times the teachers have been criticized for being not maintaining the distance. Sometimes without our knowledge we might go very too near to the student, which may be embarrassing for them, because the moment we go very near to a student, it is like we are invading their privacy. So in English, there is a golden rule: maintain your distance. The more you maintain your distance, it gives the idea that you are safe. So that's why in English they call maintain your distance, and it's a golden rule. So please maintain your rule, such rules even in the college, where you should know how much distance with the student, how much distance with the colleague, and how much distance with the higher officials. All matters a lot. So this gives, and there are a lot of negatives. What you call, if you don't maintain such distances, that is the what you call idea here. So suppose somebody invades our space, what happens? Because many times without our knowledge we might invade other space. So in such cases, the person may feel troubled. Uncomfortability would come if we try to invade someone's place. They might get defensive, they may go away, or they might retaliate also. People get aggressive because if you go very near to the person, they might say, why you are approaching so near? Maintain your distance or keep away. Now that gives the idea that we should not invade other space. Now this is what you call important as a teacher, whether you are talking or you are keeping a distance with the same sex individual or different sex, opposite sex individual. I think you have to be very careful. You should not invade the privacy of your own students as well as your own colleagues, be it a same sex or be it opposite sex, because there could be negatives like getting troubled, and they might get defensive, they may become aggressive, or they may retaliate. There could be a complaint against you. So be careful about that. Then another concept important is the mask we wear. I'm not talking about the corona mask. We are talking about the psychological mask. Of course, we wear different kinds of what you call a mask. A public smile, though you are not interested, is a mask because, and many times what happens, our own students, they wish you sometimes they with the with the gratitude they wish you, with the respect they wish you, sometimes with the fear also they wish you. Now, don't you think they are wearing masks? Sometimes we do that when we don't like our what you call higher officials, though we have to wish them. We do wish them, but I think there is some negativity in that. So public mask as public smile is also a kind of mask. Then a clothing also a kind of mask where we try to hide something. Then what you call have a correction in our face. It could be a small makeup is also a kind of a mask where we want to hide something from originality. Sometimes our masks we extend on the road as well as at the work. So the big question is, can we drop our mask? Difficult because we have to use different masks at different places. In workplace, I cannot use the mask which I use at home, and at home I cannot use the mask which I use at what do you call in the workplace. Workplace. So at workplace, I have to use a kind of mask which is meant for work. At home, I have to maintain a mask which is meant for home. So interchange is not a good idea. So that's where you may be feel troubled. Then slowly getting into what you call gestures and postures, because anthropologists so far have identified more than 30,000 gestures and postures. So we are not highlighting all of them, only the important ones we are going to highlight. So once we talk about these gestures and postures, please remember that our gestures convey a lot. Now, for example, you see the open palm gesture. What you are seeing right now is the open palm gesture, and this open palm gesture has got its own meaning. So usually we say a open palm gesture is an indicator of honesty. Suppose a student, suppose you are inquiring with the student, and if the student has this open gestured expressions, that means the student is honest enough to tell something. Sometimes the gestures will be not open. The hands may be in the pockets, or it could be in the back pockets. This gives the idea that what you call the student may not be very honest to answer you. But be careful before applying any of these principles. You should have a lot of what you call a training in that to interpret the body language, because you may end up in troubles. So be careful about the gestures which a student use, where you can easily find out whether your student is answering honestly or not. That also fine. Then there are palm gestures. Now remember, when a palm gestures we talk about, there are several palm gestures. I'll start from the right side. One is called a submissive palm position, another one is the dominant palm position. This you can usually find in shaking hands or handshakes. A person who gives a submissive palm position usually is supposed to be what you call in a lower cadre than the what you call the person who is what you call he is greeting with. Whereas a person who gives dominant palm positions will have what you call idea that he is superior to the others. Now this is where you have to easily identify whether person who is interacting with you having a dominant palm position or submissive palm position. Based on that you can decide the person's personality. Then there are a lot of what do you call gestures from the hand. Now for example, if you see the last one is called as what you call pointers. Now if you see this particular gesture pointer, I would request you to avoid this gesture inside the class or outside the class. Why? Because these pointers will have what you call pointers might irritate the other person. That's why I'm telling, try to avoid such gestures, because pointers usually irritate the other person. So rather than pointers, you use palm down position, or then it can be a request. So here when you see that, now it comes like the what you call the picture number 4. It usually seems like it is what you call you are commanding or ordering, whereas this kind of gesture can give the idea that it's on a request. I think your request can be well taken rather than an order. So that's what I'm telling. Then this is what you call the, if you see, it's a thumbs up gesture where it's a winning gesture, whereas it's a thumbs down here. So these two are the pointers. So depending upon the situation and condition, you should be knowing how to use these gestures. Then slowly come to the shaking hands, where you have to be what you call bit aware of what you call, after corona we have stopped what you call reduced shaking hands. But remember, here if you see how two people are shaking hands. Now if you see here, the right side person is taking his hands are down in a submission position, but the other person on the left side is what you call giving the what you call this one, where his actions are basically on the dominant side, where the receiving end is what you call on the submissive style. In such case it's called as taking the control. Sometimes it is giving the control where your hand is up and other person's hand is down. That means you give the control. Whereas a perfect handshake would be there is no tilting. There is no tilting either to right or left or down or up. It's perfect and parallel. There is nothing like any degrees of divergence would be there. So this shows that a perfect handshake where nobody is trying to show their dominance or submissiveness to the other person. Then there is one quite interesting handshake is there. I would give a lot of what you call tips on this. So if you see the glove handshake, so where the other person trying to hold your hand from his both hands. Now understand, if is a person is a stranger and is trying to give you a what you call glove handshake, don't trust the person, because the idea is the moment first time a stranger gives you what you call a glove handshake, that means he is expecting something from you in any form, either materialistic form or in financial form or any help. So be careful. And sometimes this glove handshake is referred to as the politician's handshake. And how many of you know that? So be careful when, but you should not get confused with the persons who give this handshake who are very close to you. That's also important. So when we talk about those things, where if your close friend gives a handshake like this, that shows more closeness and intimacy. Don't what you call misinterpret the signal that the person is trying to what you call deceive you or cheat you. A close friend shows more affection and love, whereas a new person or a stranger might try to deceive you. So be careful about differentiating those things. Then another important thing is how we stand and how we jockey our positions. So in while standing and talking with others, we talk about inclusivity and non-inclusivity, even with the students. So how you include or exclude others in a group is very important. Are you so many times sometimes the students make comments about a teacher, like a student is only looking at only one side, either only towards the left or only towards the right. That means you are non-inclusive in the group. So while what you call interacting with the class, it should be a generalized way where you have to include everyone in the class. That means you should try to maintain break eye contact with all the students. It's not only referring to only a group of students or only specific student, because there are enough complaints are there about the students that a teacher will not look into our side. He'll look into only one person or only one side. So this should not happen. That means you are not including everybody in the class. So you have to be inclusive rather than non-inclusive in the class. Then parallel body positions also important, because when you what you call face the students, your position yourself to relate to each other. It's not like what you call all the time backing the students. No, not a good idea, except what you call while writing on a what you call a blackboard or whiteboard. Otherwise always is not a, it's not a good decent behavior. Most of times if you show the back to the students, because that shows like you are not a good way of what you call greeting, and I will not consider as a good gesture. Then side by side if you stand, it shows the neutrality. Usually it happens in bus stops or anywhere where you're not what you call waiting for someone or waiting for the bus. So usually there's nothing like face to face. You stand side by side. This indicates what you call neutrality. And if you talk face to face, that shows that both are involved. Then there are a lot of ideas like congruence and incongruence. Sometimes this is very easy to understand congruency and incongruency among students. So if you tell something and if it's well understood by students, there could be a congruence and lot of facial expressions. But if whatever you say and whatever students are not agreeing with it, there could be incongruence and there could be less facial contact, and the jockeying, the positions could be like they might avoid your face. So this is where you can see uh, whatever you're telling, whether it's going interesting with the students or not. Then remember, next is looking or gazing on others. Again, inside the class, one thing is how long do you look? I don't know how many of you know the recent law. If you what you call stare a woman for more than 16 seconds, that woman can put a criminal case against you for harassment. So it is if you what you call, if you stare a woman for more than 16 seconds. Now that means what? A continuous stare, nothing but dehumanization or challenging a person. Now, so that's why even in the class, I know you to stare when you are get angry. Definitely you are going to stare, but this is indirectly you are posing a challenge to the student. Then glances, where socially acceptable timing. You look once and withdraw, and again while talking you again glance. Now this gives idea that it's a social acceptable timing, and people might like it. Then appraisal, yes, sometimes you what you call raise your eyebrow. That means what? It shows interest where something is happening. It can happen with the other side also, where the appraisal can come from the students. The moment you start explaining, there could be what you call appraisal from their faces, which shows that whatever you are telling could be the things are more interested. Now my question is, do you like? do you look when you talk and do you look when you listen? Both are important. So when you talk, definitely you have to look. You cannot speak to the fan or the walls. So when you talk to the students, you have to look, but they are only glances, not the staring. As well as when someone tells you, do you listen? Nowadays we have what you call undergone a lot of innovation and technology has invaded into our life. You must have seen some people while you talking, not inside the class, outside the class, they are more concerned about their mobile and the messages. Though you are talking to them, they are more interested in their mobiles. Who has sent the message? Who is on the line? Who is sending what you call this one? Or a new message comes. So you are they are more interested in the mobile rather than your talk. So that means what? Definitely you are going to lose interest. Now, the process where the other person is interested more in mobile and than your talk is referred to as pubbing. So pubbing is a process where you are talking to a person, but the person is more interested in his mobile and his gadget, where he's what you call involved there more. So definitely you'll make out the person is more interested. So try to avoid this kind of condition with the students, and you have to educate them. When you listen carefully, don't divert your attention, because the moment you start diverting attention, the next time the person may not speak because you're more interested in other things rather than the person's talk. So both are important. When you talk, please look in the glances inside the class, and when you listen, carefully listen to them, because both are important. Because we should not think that we are only there to tell, not to listen, because sometimes there could be a solid feedback from the students that we may have to improve in our teaching style. So that means we have to seriously listen to them. You have to get a feedback too. So even looking also matters a lot. Then how do you walk inside and outside the class also matters a lot. So walking into a class or meeting with a long strides and straight posture, it gives the idea that person has long term goals and the person who tries to take the risks. You can see these things more among police officers and higher officials, where they walk in a what you call uh, with a straight posture and with the long strides. The steps are not very near. If you see the gap is too much, so that's called as long stride. And these persons are willing to take risks. And while walking like that, it conveys a lot of self confidence in the person. Why can't you develop this kind of what you call styles, so that and whatever these things are I'm telling, remember, these are from research findings, it's not my findings. So looking at these persons, automatically we try to give respect. Sometimes whatever the people are so what you call knowledgeable, they're too good, but the problem is their working style is very bad. People may not get what you call recognized. So those things also happen. So working with this kind of thing can definitely have better look and respect. Then teaching, okay, an open torso conveys trust. That's why we say while communicating with the students, don't stick on to the podium. Of course, for the fresh teachers, a podium acts as a security weapon in the beginning, but don't stick on to the uh, podium all the time, because the moment you stick on to the podium, that's not a good idea. So you have to keep the center of your body open all the times by keeping your hands and arms uncrossed. Sometimes some teachers, they what you call uh, they cross and they speak, but this conveys not much. So an open torso with the what you call movement of hands and all, but not too much, a limited number of what you call hands movement, definitely you can make your class better, where you are trying to convey better along with your words. So that's the idea. Even the torso matters. Then sometimes you can make while students sitting, where if they are doing this kind of what you call uh, body language, that means the person is kind of making a decision. Okay, uh, by noting whose reaction the audience is observing. Then in a meeting it can happen, the audience always looks into most important person amongst them as reinforcement. Ultimately, suppose you have a meeting with the principal, a principal is a person who is going to take a decision. Now you can easily make out whether the principal is going to take a decision or not, but this gesture is very important, where putting fingertips together, one fingertips to the other finger, other hand fingertips, so that this gives lot of idea. So that's called as a decision making process. Then arm gestures. So even arm gestures also convey a lot for us. So if you see what you call one of the gestures which you are finding here, the first one, this is called as superiority or confidence gesture. So this will you do when when you will be given a power, and where this can be seen especially in a invigilatory process. When you are put in invigilation, I think you are the boss of the class or class hall, where you use this kind of what you call gesture, where it's called a superiority and confidence gesture, because you're the boss inside the class or the hall. But suppose principal comes that time, so automatically the hands come front. So now when the hands comes front means what? It's a request. Then there is a what you call hand gripping wrist gesture, where you can see the left hand has gone slightly up above the right hand. Now it is called as hand grip wrist gesture. Now this is not a good gesture because it shows a negative attitude. Then you see the third gesture, the upper arm grip, where the hand is gone up almost near the shoulder. Now this gives the idea that the person is really angry with the situation, but is trying to control his anger. But remember, all this, all situational based. If there is weather based, because sometimes we do some of the body language, express some of the body languages, but if the weather is influencing that, then we cannot get that understanding that the person is like that. So that is why I'm telling you, before you what you call practice and understand body language, you have some experience and readings about body language, and it's a quite interesting one. Then arm gestures, you must have seen different people having different kinds of gestures. See now the first gesture, see the fist, where it's not what you call open, it's closed. Now this shows a hostile attitude towards the situation or the person. Now here you see the second one, second arm gesture, where the firm stand is taken here, where the person is no, he wants to prove his own point. And these are things you have seen in your day-to-day life. Then you see here the third picture, where if you see both the what you call thumbs are up, that means what is a superior attitude. Only thing is, if you start observing, definitely you can get all these gestures and postures, and it's quite interesting to analyze them. Then evaluation gestures, where as a teacher you should be what you call very what you call curious to know your students' reaction towards your class. Now, see here, there are the 2-3 gestures. See, one is evaluation gesture. It's called as the person. If you see the fingers, thumb, and the fingers where it is there. Now this gives the idea that person is trying to evaluate your talk. That means what? Whether is person is trying to evaluate whether the speaker is telling right or wrong and how good it is. But this evaluation gesture you must have seen with the students also. Sometimes again a questioning attitude and a decision cluster. The thumb is here, and see the cheeks are on other fingers are near the cheek. That gives idea that again the person trying to have a evaluation over you and a decision is being made. Then this is a quite serious the third one is a quite serious gesture, where there is a what you call evaluation gesture, and there is a decision gesture, as well as there is a boredom gesture. Now why I'm telling this boredom gesture, because you can see what you call the thumb is down the cheek. That means what is trying to avoid the sleep. Sometimes you must have seen your students putting the entire hand on their cheeks and bending their what you call heads. Now this definitely gives the idea that the student is not no more interested in your class. So automatically you get a clue that whatever you are telling is not getting interested by the students. So immediately you have to change the topic, or you have to change this your style of teaching. It calls for some corrections from your side. Then you see here also critical evaluation and a kind of appraisal as well as decision making. Three gestures. And if you see the legs up, so all these evaluation gestures you can decide and analyze where it can improve your what you call skills later. Then sometimes we say people lie. Now, how to identify that people are lying? See the first one. Usually we say nose touch. Now remember again, when you talk about a nose touch, it doesn't mean that. So if there is a itching in the nose and the person is trying to scratch the nose, then it's not a lie. But unnecessary person takes the finger to the nose and pointer, and he tries to touch slightly. That gives the idea that okay, person is trying to tell a lie. Or there's the eye rub, though there is nothing in the eye or the vicinity, the person tries to slowly rub the eyes. Now all these things, what they try to divert your attention. So once the person tries to divert the attention, that gives the idea that person is what you call trying to hide something from you. But if there's something itching is there in the eye and the person rubs that, so don't confuse. Then the other things what I want to tell you is about what you call about the students. Usually when the student tell a lie, so they usually avoid the eye to eye contact. That's usually when they tell a lie, they avoid the eye to eye contact. There could be a false cough like that. It's not a true cough. There could be a collar pull just to avoid the things. There could be what you call scratching of head, slight scratch as if there are what you call there's a itching, but actually there is no scratch. So you can easily make out a student is telling a lie. So you can easily make out and you can identify. But be careful while identify such things. And sometimes as a teacher, as a guide and a counselor and a philosopher, you should know about the student's condition. Sometimes because of the of late developments in the family styles, changed lifestyles, there are a lot of changes are happening. Students are under depression, students are under anxiety, and they suffer from stress. So as a teacher, you should able to look into this, and each gesture gives a lot of idea that a person is under depression, person is under anxiety, or person is under stress. Now all these things, if you see the this one, see here depression condition where the person is frustrated a lot, not able to even look into. See the facial expression in the anxiety, and see the facial expression and the condition of a person under stress. Now all this calls for some attention from the student, because teacher as a mentor, it is not that your job just to go and teach in the class. You should be able to understand the what you call psychology of the students, and if they're under stress or under anxiety or under depression, you have a moral responsibility to interfere and correct it. So that is more important. So try to understand the emotions of the students also. Then uh, don't get misinterpreted by the signal, because it can be a big trouble, can be a legal trouble. So and you should be knowing at what level you have to interact. I'm avoiding few of the slides so that we can go forward. So now what you call as a teacher, what are the internal barriers of communication? Once you talk about internal barriers of communication, it is basically the subjective factors. It's basically poor physical health or illness. One thing can affect us a lot because of the ill health and what you call illness. Our communication may be affected because we are not able to communicate properly because of the ill health. It could be internal barrier. Sometimes we are not well read and our knowledge is very less. So when the student asks questions and we are not able to answer, then it calls for a barrier. Sometimes our mental health is affected and improper psychological makeup. Morning only you fought with the wife or principal has scolded you, and in that condition you come to the class. Your mental health is affected. Your anger is more on the principal or a spouse, and that anger is what you call uh, reflected over the students. Should not be done, but this can affect your communication. Then handicapped in understanding the symbolic expression. Many times you are not able to catch up the body language of the students. Verbalism, how it speaks, many times you don't get words in time. Then many times what are the things are happening through graphical representation and all, we find it difficult to understand. So that also calls for some kind of barriers. Then there are external barriers too. Those external barriers actually, where noise is one of the important thing, where it can block your communication. For example, if your college is or your institute is nearby a city where it is a very traffic is there, so those traffic can block what you call your communication. Then sound inside the class also can stop your what you call communication. And uh, continuous interference by the students. Many times what happens, I have seen some of the teachers, after 5 minutes the teachers will be blocked and the students will speak more, where a teacher is not allowed to what you call talk more, where students are dominating the class. So that also calls for externalizing, and the barrier is being put by the students. So there are several external barriers also there for communication. You have to be very careful to manage them. Then after having all this, how to what you call achieve the effective communication inside the class? The first thing is two-way communication. Now what do you mean by two-way communication? Now one thing I want to tell you, as a teacher, please permit the students, you have to permit the students to express their views and opinions. I have seen some of the teachers talking continuously for 50 to 55 minutes, and they don't even permit the student to talk back or give their feedback. Now this can have what you call lot of impediment in your communication process. So that is why when you talk in the class or communicating the things, so we say at a stretch you should not speak more than 20 minutes at a stretch, because the more you speak, what you call, there is a continuous communication which students might find it difficult to understand. So have a break in between and have a lighter moments in between, and having that, a two-way communication would manage better. Then the second part is effective feedback for efficient teaching. Now without a good feedback you cannot teach better. So it is nice from your part that after each class, after each class, you take a feedback from the students. What did you like? What you didn't like? And what is expected? So the moment you get the feedback from the students, what did you like? What you didn't like? It could be including the what you call speed of presentation. Sometimes what we do, sometimes we talk fast, sometimes we talk very slow. A student might get confused. So feedback and the timing part is also important. Then principle of clarity. How many of you really ask after each class how much you understood? Do you want me to what you call discuss again? So that's why you have to give a option for the students for questioning. So a good teacher always says, don't ask questions in the end. Ask questions whenever you feel like. But some of the teachers says, don't ask questions in between. That's not a good behavior. As a good teacher should communicate for to the students by asking them what you call, whenever they feel like asking questions and for the clarity, they should ask questions. Then development of motivation. Now, this is quite interesting how you may motivate the student. One is motivating them in the subject part itself. How? Giving a latest examples, giving what you call latest trends in the content matter, and how it is applicable in our day-to-day life. This can have a motivation for the students to learn better. Then, use of technology and instructional material which are advanced in nature. Now, when you talk about use of technology and instructional materials, remember that the UGC has uh, given instruction for all the teaching institution that use of ICT in the teaching learning process. Now, by mean ICT, many people have misunderstood that it's only LCD. LCD is just a part of technology, but how best you use, that is more important, because in a class you should be a teacher, you should be a presenter rather than a PowerPoint reader. So many times there is a lot of complaints that technology is being abused because they just read the PowerPoints. No, you should not be reading a PowerPoint. You should be presenting a PowerPoint. That means PowerPoint should be there. It's only as adjunct for your teaching process, but you have to use the technology. And you can use a lot of audio visual materials so that the understanding content will be easier for the student. Now, when I say audio visual materials, for example, if you are using a article, somebody is teaching a brain, I think it is you show a 3D view of the brain on a screen, which can give a realistic view rather than just explaining what is brain. So where technology can make your job easier, in between you get lot of space, lot of breathing space, you get lot of relaxation where they're what you call looking into PPT or the presentation. So you will, rather than continuous speaking, you also have kind of some kind of breaks in between. Then teaching strategies and skills, very important. How do you start and how do you end up? You cannot start everything with the complex part first and then go to the simple. So the teaching also, you start with the simple concept first and then you continue the complex issues. So teaching strategies are very important, and understanding and trying to understand the mentality of the students also very important, because I don't know, there are three types or 3 to 4 types of students are there. There are fast learners, there are slow learners, there are intermediate learners, and depending on their conditions you have to manage them, because each one's perspective of understanding is what you call very important. So teaching strategies and skills, how best you use. When I talk about the skills, how many of you really practice before the mirror before you come to the class, so that you'll be knowing yourself how you are going to present? So that itself is a good way of learning things, where you start presenting yourself. So how to, lastly we are talking about how to overcome the barriers of effective communication. The first thing is use the simple words, don't go for jargons. Use body language in an efficient manner. It could be smile, it could be eye contact, it could be gestures, it could be tone. So your body language can convey more than what you call your words. Then cultural sensitivity. Now this is very important. The way you use a language is depending on the culture. So suppose a person from Mysore is deputed to North Karnataka. I think he has to understand the cultural sensitivity of North Karnataka and accordingly he has to speak. Similarly, a person from North Karnataka is deputed to uh, coastal Karnataka. I think the culture is very different and accordingly they have to speak. Otherwise, there will be a problem. And frequent checking for understanding in a class. You have to immediately after the class or in between, you have to ask the class how much you understood and did you understand. Now remember, in a class, if majority of the students are failing, 90 out of 100 if they are failing, I think the blame goes on the teacher, not on the students, because you have not done your job well. Then seeking participation, you should, that is called again inclusion of everyone. How many people are really, how many students are really included in your talk and participated, or they are only passive listeners rather than active listeners? And how to make them active listeners? By your way and by your skills. Effective questions, not ineffective questions, where questions should be there from your side as well as questioning should be there from your student side. Both are important in an effective communication skills. Then only both side there will be benefit. And at the end of the what you call this one, you have to summarize what has been said, and next morning you have to start with the recapping. And ultimately, you have to connect with the audience. Think that students are listening to you. So while connecting them, how you have to behave, how you should be your communication skill, all these things are important. So this is where we are going to stop this talk, where we are going to what you call talk about communication skills. So there will be few minutes for you. If you have got some doubts, feel free to ask questions quickly. Otherwise, you can ask questions in the second session, because second session we are going to talk about stress part. That time also we can discuss, but still we have some time to discuss. Any questions if you have, feel free to ask.
So just one question.
Yes, sir.
So you did talk about communication. That was very interesting presentation. Sir, could you also share a few tips when it comes to dealing with the differently able students in the classroom? So how effectively we can communicate with them as well?
Sir, now again it depends. That's the question, but the problem is that will be a very different talk, because they're what you call we call them as uh, handicapped ones. We call them as today we the nomenclature changed, the Divanjans. You're talking about them, right?
Yes, sir, differently. Huh.
Different label. They're called as Divyanjans now. Okay,
Mhm. Ha, ha. Yes,
from the
yes,
central government, but the
yes.
strategies are very different, sir. Because while dealing with them, the communication goes by a lot of what you call other types. Like for a blind person, we have to teach in a very different way. This will not work out. Where we have to use a
Mhm.
lot of materials, including even teaching them with the braille. That's very what you call this one. And I don't know, you heard of sign language. For those who are deaf
Mhm.
and dumb, we may have to use sign language, and that calls for a different class. And I have not dealt much with them, to be frank. I should admit that. But definitely, it's a quite interesting area, and it comes under special education area. Definitely, I have got a few materials. You can note down my email ID later. I can definitely pass
Yes,
on
sir.
to you. Huh?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I
Thank you,
can
sir.
definitely pass on to you. Yeah, but it's a different
Yes, sir.
field.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
More questions?